Welcome. We're getting into chapter 6 now, alright? Course is starting. The course is starting. Alright. So, as you can get the gist of it as we're going through so far, is that I'm basically just reading these chapters out loud as a convenience. Something that I visioned as part of this package that would help make it a better experience, or also, you could be driving and still listening at the same time. I think that'd be very convenient. So I just wanted to do that. So hopefully I'm putting the right energy and the right spirit in behind it and having the right commentary and not talking too much, but talking enough just so this information can easily get into you instead of just like go over you or around you. I'd rather the information going into you. So there's, the information is, it's not just, we're not doing all this in vain, right? That is, there's a retention. There's a level of retention is remembered. So table of contents, we're on cost per mile right now, and then we'll get into how to drive as an owner operator next. So here's chapter 6. Boom, cost per mile. Yeah, I was looking pretty frizzy. I didn't realize that until just now. You see that? Pretty frizzy. My hair has come a long way since then. Yeah, this is out in front of the Hilton Hotel in Shreveport. Just taking the pictures. Long sleeve shirt on. So here we go. Chapter 6, cost per mile, figuring your cost per mile. This is not a very long chapter, so we're just going to go ahead and get through this one, but this is important. Cost per mile, so I'll just read it instead of talking about it. So I'm pretty sure I wrote everything I needed that I was just about to say anyways. Figuring our cost per mile can be a very valuable tool in the early stages of your business. Even as a more advanced business owner, it's still good to run your numbers again from time to time to make sure you're on track with everything. So cost per mile is also shortened and abbreviated to CPM. So if you see CPM with a ... CPM also means cost per mile. Nothing too crazy, but that's what we're talking about. Cost per mile is how much it costs you to run your entire trucking business per mile. So it's all basically, so right here, right? It's an easy math problem. We're just going to take the total dollar amount of all your cost and divide it by the number of miles you plan to run. Right? So all the cost, everything spent in 1 year, divided by 12. So if you don't have that number yet, let's just get through the chapter. We'll talk about doing estimations and whatnot. But I'll see if I do. But it's not. Let's just get to the chapter. With this number, you're better able to gauge if something is if it's a great deal for you or not. Right. With this number, you can estimate how much money you'll be making at the company you're interested in leasing to. Right. If they tell you there's a flat rate, etc., it costs you per mile. So here in the red, for the person who books their own loads, this number can help them decide what rates they should charge. An example is if your cost per mile is $1.10, but the company you're looking at leasing to is only paying $1.20 per mile plus fuel surcharge of maybe 30 cents, you just do the math, right? $1.50, you add up that, let's just say $1.20 plus 30 cents for fuel, that's $1.50 minus your cost per mile, which is $1.10. And that leaves you with only 40 cents per mile. Though it's common sense, after doing the math, you'll see that the above example is not a very good deal with only 40 cents a mile left over for profit. A company driver can, especially in 2021, at the time of this recording, going into 2022, company driver can definitely make more money than that. So keep looking, right? So let's do a pretend calculation for a leased driver. Okay, here we go. This is some nice estimations. I'm glad I did this. Let's do a pretend calculation. We're going to pretend for a leased driver. These numbers will be based off yearly cost in each category. Let's just say that truck notes $18,000. I'm sure I did that by some number. I probably did like 1,500 times 12 or something like that. Insurance of $3,000 a year. That'll be for physical damage and gap insurance. If you're still, since this is going to be, if there's a truck note, there's going to be physical damage and gap insurance or whatever needs to be paid. IRP, which the company will probably bill out throughout the year, $40 a week or so. And fuel, $35,000, which we pay as we go. Maintenance, $15,000 per year is usually a well benchmark, which is 15 cents per mile times 100,000 miles estimated. 10 to 20 cents per mile is a fair estimate cost for maintenance, give or take, depending on year, make, model, your truck, etc. Everything that we just discussed in chapter 5 plays a big part in that. All these numbers added up equal 72,800. So 72,800 divided by 100,000 miles, and it does look like it's backwards, but that's the correct way to do it. You take the total dollar amount divided by the total miles, or however many miles you expect to drive. If you're doing like 80,000 miles, 50,000 miles, you just divide that number in. So in this case, 100,000 miles, divided, into 72,800 divided by 100,000. 100,000 into 72,800 is 73 cents. So the cost per mile for this example, pretend example, would be 73 cents. Oh, buddy, let's see. In this example, cost per mile, 73 cents, right? It's pretty simple. But this was a very basic example. In reality, you would have to add in everything you could think of that has to do with business expenses, which is cell phone, ELD, truck wash, heavy highway tax, IFTA, and etc. In revenue, I think a good place to aim for is at least $1 to $1.50 a mile over your cost per mile. So for this example, that would need to be hauling for at least $1.73. Bare bones, $1.73. So then that would be $1 profit over 73 cents. But of course, we're not aiming for the low end of things. That's just to know what the range is, and that's how this cost per mile helps us stay on track of growing instead of just maintaining. So yeah, and a lot of these $1.73, it's not really even happening in too many lease deals as far as like flat rate leases. I don't know what FedEx and UPS is at right now, but really it's almost like kind of got to go into booking your own freight or having your own authority and somebody dispatching for you if you choose, and they do well, or you lease to a local operation or like a regional operation that has dedicated freight, different things going on. Yeah, but I really just suggest getting into a position where you can book your own freight. So keep playing with your numbers, which is your cost, until you get them low as possible. Also, what I mean by that is that's just part of the journey of business. As we get overhead, we also look at what we can trim from our overhead, things we don't need, and especially in the beginning, if we're working on getting our first $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 in the bank, we really need to cut back on certain things like entertainment, movie theater, not movie theaters, but like Netflix, different subscriptions, and going out to eat, all the time, or like or having car payments or getting a new car too soon or something, that, especially if we're not really going to be home a lot and stuff like that. If we, if there's not other things going on at home, like, direct responsibilities. And even then, we do what we can to keep those low, right? Play with the numbers, get them low as possible. Also, play around with different scenarios. Run the numbers if your truck note was $1,000 a month versus $2,000 a month, and see what your cost per mile would be then. See what your cost per mile would be with no truck note. That really lowers our cost per mile, our business operating cost. Not so much our home operating, which is important too. We'll talk about that more because we've got to talk about the home budgeting. It's very important. But yeah, it lowers the trucking overhead cost per mile, that's what we're talking about, right? Cost per mile. If you're interested in getting your own authority, then just get some insurance quotes, call around Progressive, OIDA, stuff like that, and add the insurance cost into your cost totals to see what your new cost per mile would be. If you really, really want to get into the numbers, and in the beginning, I do suggest you get into the numbers until you really get a good knack for it. And even then, nothing wrong with sticking to the numbers. Guys that come through this program, I'm thinking of one in particular right now, just really keeps his numbers down to a T. way more accurate than I do, and and I respect that, because it does take extra work. It's extra work, extra part of organization. He's got Microsoft Excel spreadsheets, and that's cool. If that's what you want to do, boom, you'll just be that much more on point with it. So just make sure that 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 you're taking action, you're making great deals, and then the rest of that will just be for great record keeping, right? And yeah, great record keeping, and also just to keep a good gauge on maybe what you can improve on, or if things up and down and stuff like that. Because once you do this for long enough, you should be able to do pretty well with budgeting all your money, having more than enough money in the bank. You look at your bank, it's 40, next thing you know it's 50, next thing you know it's 60, it's 70, it's 100. And you just know when you're spending too much, when you're not, and it just becomes a common sense thing. But for sure, if you feel more organized by really keeping track of it, in the beginning, I definitely suggest keeping track of it. But really, that's the beautiful thing about budgeting money is basic mathematics, addition, subtraction. It's more so temperament. It's more so like patience and just keeping track of how much how much money you have and how much money you want to keep at all times. And we'll talk about that for sure in the home life and budgeting chapter. If you're interested in that, which I think is a very important key of this trucking success. Okay. So by running the numbers like this, like we just mentioned, by adding things in and out, you're able to see what will work and what will not work for you. You should always be moving in a more profitable direction, right? If you're already leased to a company now and you decide to leave, you need to really run your numbers against what the new company is offering and figure out if you're going forward or backwards with this move. Aim to never go backwards. If you must, you can sidestep, move sideways from one company that's like equally as good to another if like the situation really, really calls for it and you have to make a move. But if you're going to make a move, try to make each move always count in the direction of going forward as far as a more profitable operation, something that, you're advancing your operation, you're taking more money home, more profit, better lifestyle, home more, etc., right? If you must sidestep, then sidestep, but always aim to make your next move your best move and in a more profitable direction, right? So right here in the big letters, you're the one putting in all this hard work and putting your money up. So make each move count, right? For example, this was my course. I don't know if I spelled course right, but not a speller. Spell enough. Spell what I need to spell to get it across. I'm one of those individuals. I know way more words than I spell, but that's all right because I'm not in the business of putting spells on people, casting spells. Yeah, right. If you caught that one, you caught that one. It's a little in between the line play on words, but seriously, boom. For example, this was my course ever since I started 10 years ago. You'll see that each move I made got stronger and more profitable. For example, right, I started at US Express. I was there for 8 months. I went to Prime. I kind of had to make that move. I did something probably, I kind of backed myself into a little corner in the beginning, and just was like, I was offered a deal with her, like, hey, you can get a clean record, just keep it moving. Just learning the ropes of how to drive and be careful, and so went to Prime. And I stayed with Prime for about a year, and I did company drive for like a month or two. Then I found a mentor. His name is Glenn Smith. Cool, very, very, came into my life at the right time and gave me the motivation I needed to get into leasing and really helped me out early on with numbers and guided me into the process of the business. So I went into the leasing there at Prime, then stayed there for about a year. And then I was like, oh, boom, I'm paying a lot of money for this truck. If I'm spending all this money, I want to get my own truck and have it, and I want to book my own freight. So when I turned 23, I went to Landstar, went there for 5 years, stayed there, booked my own freight. It was time to go. I outgrew Landstar for reasons that, no need to, badmouth, but it's all good. definitely recommend Landstar's, for what it is, especially if you want to have a nice stepping stone into getting your own authority and get some experience booking freight and whatnot. It's pretty similar to how we do in open load boards. Then I went to a small company where I ran my own dispatch on a public load board for 6 months. So that's where I first got my experience outside of leasing and booking my own freight on the public load boards. And doing it, so to speak. Then I got my own authority when I went from there. So you see, but I ran my numbers every time before I made a move, especially before I left Landstar. No, before I left this the small company here, Pathway Transportation. And I went to get my own authority. So yeah, I definitely ran the numbers big on that time. I ran the numbers, insurance. Actually, I think I was doing that probably when I was still, it wasn't at Landstar yet. Yeah, but yeah, after spending that time with the smaller companies, about 20 trucks, and using truckstop.com, I was just like, okay, I see what's going on. But I really ran my numbers. Long story short, the point I'm getting here, you see, I gotta walk it like I talk it, right? So that's what I did, step by step. Instead of like going from U.S. Express to Warner, then from Warner I tried Schneider out for a year, then from Schneider I went to Swift for 2 years, and it's just like, no, we can't go backwards. We got to pay attention to see what's going on out here, who's offering the best deals, and if we're going to be doing owner operating, then we need to get more and more to a position where we can book our own freight and have more say-so on what's going on, and have companies that that are pleasant to work with, and with nice percentages. So right here in the red, by knowing my cost per mile and by making alterations or edits to it, I was able to tell if my next move was the right move based off of the math, the money. Before I got my own authority, I got my insurance quotes. Big deal. Insurance quotes. I figured out how much I'd be paying for fuel, since I wasn't going to have the same fuel discount anymore, or so I thought. That's where NASDAQ comes in. Oops. I think I skipped it up a page. But I went ahead and, did my fuel at full price, or so to speak, or just a little bit of a discount. And I plugged all these numbers in, and I started making simulations based off of the math. I figured out if the 13% extra that I was going to make was going to cover the cost of the extra insurance and allow me to profit better. After doing the math, and what this 13% is because I was getting 87% at the small company I was at, but I was still paying for my own insurance. So I was like, is this going to make up for the, is this 13%, is it worth it, so to speak, right? So I'm doing the mathematics on it, cost per mile, with insurance added in and with extra fuel. And after doing the math for a while and really figuring it out, I was able to make an educated, decision. I was able to lower the risk in my decision. I'm like, okay, boom. I'm advancing myself, and I have been right each time. So that's pretty cool. When you trust your gut, then it shows itself. Then once you start to develop a gut feeling, then I would just say just go with your gut most of the time, because each person has their own unique situation, and just gauge it off everything that and you learned, and then if you're not sure about your gut, then just ask around, gather opinions, but once you start to produce results, then it gets more and more okay to trust yourself, I think. So right here in the big blue box, we're looking at this cost per mile formula is one of the easiest and best ways to feel what's going on with the potential move, and to see if you should be doing better on incoming revenue or expenses. Even if you don't want to do the math all the time, that's fine. But definitely run the math before you switch companies, operations, or before you take on a new big bill. Any type of bill at home or whatever, especially in the beginning, where you're getting a good handle on it. Even some of us that get more experienced out here, years and years go on, we get a little comfortable with the money we make, and sometimes we add on stuff quicker than we should. So you just got to be careful. We don't want to sabotage ourselves by spending money too quickly. We just marathon this race as well as we can. Run the numbers and make sure everything makes sense, right? and run the numbers and make sure everything adds up. This is with any business. You have to know the cost of your goods and services in order to know if you're making money at the prices you currently charge or accept. Trucking is a business just like any business. And the more that we treat ourselves like a business owner, the more you treat yourself like a business owner and not just a truck driver, the better it will be for you and your company, the one that you own. Right? So know your numbers, know what you need to profit. Don't accept less just because you didn't do the math until it was too late. So go ahead and do it now. A real business owner would. And you are a real business owner too. So it is your responsibility to know your cost per mile, your cost. In any business, you got to know your cost. Luckily, this is a pretty easy thing to do. It's just what I call basic money math. It's basic money mathematics. Add up all your costs and divide your cost by the total miles per year you plan to drive. So we're almost recapping here. I'm just repeating it a little bit to get the message in. But so what's your cost per mile? Anything under $1 per mile is considered pretty good. With the amount of miles I run, around 50,000 a year, I'm right around that 75 to 85 cents cost per mile myself. Knowing your cost per mile is like being in the huddle before the football play, before actually calling hut and running the scrimmage. So running past the line. So once you know your cost per mile, it's like knowing what play you're about to run before you run it, compared to just hopping on the line of scrimmage and just winging it. Right? So it's being more prepared, it's having a plan. It's already having the play before you run it. Know your numbers and people, or know your numbers, or people will try to take advantage of you financially. Of course, whether it's dispatchers, companies, brokerages, and etc. But really, it's just at the end of the day, it's kind of ourselves to blame. So we just don't need to do that. We just need to pay more attention. Do not let people take advantage of you. You are a business owner, not just a truck driver, right? It's a lot of responsibility that you got, in a positive way. But, we just got to own it and don't let people, push that around, because, we put a lot of time, money, and effort into this, and we're going to succeed at it. So so driving the truck is the easy part. Always say that. Driving the truck is the easy part. You get to do once all your business is in order. Don't let the companies or brokers tell you what's good. Right? I mean, you can listen, of course, but don't let them, don't blindly. That's what I mean by that. Don't blindly be they're like, oh, this is good for you, and this is $2 a mile. That's great freight, all that stuff, right? So just you run the math for yourself and decide for yourself. You got this, So this is an add up, So here, let's just recap it right here. Boom. So to do this cost per mile, you add up all your cost and divide that number by how many miles you drive per year. This is your cost per mile. Boom. So you see right here in this blue box, this is the whole chapter, literally in a nutshell, so to speak. Boom. Add up all your costs and divide that number by how many miles you plan to drive per year. That is it. This number is your cost per mile. Check. Cool. We got it. Cost per mile. And like I said up here, we got some cool examples. Well, not cool example, but a little bit of example. So, you would add up like your truck note, how much you pay for insurance, your IRP, your fuel, your maintenance. These are the big dog numbers right here. Then the rest would be like, how much are you paying for your load board, or how much are you paying for your IFTA. Just do your best to think of all the things that are costing you business and how much you spend on each one of those things per year, then add them up. Now, is figuring out your cost per mile necessary? No. That was a weird face. No, not really. But in the beginning, it's good to have a gauge of it. So, I mean, really more importantly than knowing cost per mile, I think is having great low booking skills. Because a lot of it, that's what it's about, just great low booking skills. But it's nice to have this number, something that I suggest that all new companies do. And if you haven't done it, just go ahead and do this when you get some free time. Add up your cost per mile to see what it really costs you. So when you run that cheap load for $1.50 and it seems like you're not making any money, you might actually be making a little bit of money. You know, of course, you know, nothing to, take home on, so to speak, or brag, something to be like super proud of, but it's good to know. So when you have some time, see what your cost per mile is. But definitely as you move from company to company, right? That was, what I mentioned earlier. When you move from company to company, just make sure your cost per mile, check out what you're paying now, what you're paying then. And what you're paying now, and see what they're offering, so that way you can do the math on it. What they pay, subtract out what you cost you, then you can get an idea of how much you're going to actually be keeping once you pay everybody what they need. The next chapter will be one even you might take lightly. But I advise you, do not take my next chapter lightly. It's very serious. It's one of the biggest keys. The next chapter is called How to Drive. Not how to drive. How to drive as an owner-operator. How you drive will have a huge influence in your truck maintenance cost. Your maintenance costs. How much fuel you use. And ultimately your success in this business. The great part is, how you drive is completely up to you and it's in your control. So let's continue. Here's a picture of this load I did out in, whatchamacallit. It was out in Chesapeake, Virginia area. So boom, that's chapter 6. Cost per mile. Let's keep it moving.